Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Kenny and Adam, and we are going to be talking about the 14 Amazons. This is a film directed by Cheng Kang and Charles Tung Xiaoyung. It has an all-star cast that includes Ivy Ling Po, Lily Ho, Lisa Liu, Yu Hua, Lo Lie, Wang Ping, Li Qing, and Chu Pei, among many others. In this 1972 award-winning epic based on stories, plays, and legends, the women of the Yang family go to war with Western Xia when their beloved general Yang Zhongbao dies defending the border. So that's the sort of quick synopsis, and we're going to get into the sort of individual beats of the movie. But just off the bat, guys, what did you think of it?
I really enjoyed the movie. I mean, I had a few issues with sort of the vast number of characters in the cast and the sort of lack of sort of visual differentiation between some of the ladies from the Yang family. But the key characters were distinct and recognizable, and I enjoyed the sort of the fight scenes there as well. Some of it did feel a bit weak at times, but I feel like that's it's sort of made up for by how brutal the scenes actually ended up turning to be. So yeah, and I thought actually some of the fight scenes had a very Chang Che feel to them. I don't know if just because it was a sort of they used the same sort of blood for their special effects, but
It's the famous Shaw Brothers blood. That's what it is.
yeah,
That Shaw
it's
Brothers blood.
the same source, the same tank that they just pour it out of. Yeah, so some of the fights is actually quite brutal. I like the effects there, and I really enjoy the story as well. It's just that it's unusual, and you normally women don't get as big of a part in these in sort of wuxia and martial arts movies, and this is just purely focused on the women of the Yang family, and it's sort of highlighting their valor and not sort of forgetting their compassion as well. Like the reason they're going throughout or for all of this is just to sort of avenge a family members of theirs and uphold the honor of the Yang family as well, while showing some of the chivalry that men would normally be expected to show in these types of movies and sort of subverting it that way. And no, I really enjoyed the movie actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I mean, it's after watching three Chang Cheh movies in a row, it was slower paced than those, but I still was pretty drawn in, and I was pretty emotionally invested in the movie on the whole. I mean, I had some of the same issues with, telling some of the more minor characters in the family apart as far as who was who, but you really only need to know who the the primary characters are to follow it. So it wasn't a huge deal, but yeah, I was pleased with this one.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I like this movie a lot. I think it's kind of like what Kenny was saying about the brutality of it. There's something.
Mm.
It's less about the. There's not as much emphasis on some of the physical performances as there just is on sort of the the end result of all of the fight. And I mean, the physical performances are good too, but the thing that sort of sticks in your mind after you saw the film is the crunching and the bloodletting and sort of it's a little bit unflinching when it comes to
Yeah, very
the
much so.
violence. And it is interesting that they're doing that in a movie that's like very specifically about a large group of women that are going to fight a war that the men in the society aren't willing to fight. Like they ask the minister of war to send troops and he won't, and he's trying to cut a deal with the Western Shah, and so the matriarch of the family, after the general is killed, basically decides that they're going to go and do it. So it's for that sort of having that focus on women and being able to still have them get it just as bad as the guys would kind of
Mhm.
makes the point even stronger than if it was just the valor but without the real cost of it.
Yeah.
um, so I guess getting into the sort of structure of the movie, it begins where General Yang is defending the border, and he's trying to escape because they've had a tremendous loss, and he ends up, you know, making a final stand against the five princes of Western Shah. But before he's done that, he sends two of his generals off to go inform his family of the dire situation. And so there's this, you know, this really sort of poetically shot scene where after he's killed, he's just standing he's like kneeling in the wind in place. And you know, there's another movie called Eight Diagram Pole Fighter that's drawn from similar material, and they do something quite like that in there. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's sort of like I guess you would call it like a death painting moment in the movie. It just kind of, it has an odd sort of appearance to it as a result. But that's sort of the prologue. So I don't know, did you guys have any thoughts on the way the film opened, whether from the narration or from the death of General Yang?
I mean, we were sort of immediately thrown into the sort of stalwart and the unyielding nature of the general, and it sort of sets a nice undertone as well for the you know, the rest of the Yang family, and how they're all sort of unflinching in their desire to fulfill their duty and achieve their vengeance. And I do sort of wonder if, you know, the Western the Western Shah people were actually that brutal in their sort of torture. It feels a bit over the top. Like I understand that this is sort of like drawn from maybe like stories and myths and stuff about that sort of period. So maybe they always sort of paint the Western Shah people as more brutal than necessary. But it did feel a bit extreme, though. You know, the guy, like the General Yang, had like 3 arrows in him, like one in his arm, his leg, and his stomach or whatever. And he's been hooked by the mace, been slapped with an iron hand. Like he's been brutalized in a very, very sort of graphic way, and still standing. And you know, it was definitely a scene with a lot of impact, and it sets a good tone for the rest of the movie and what you should sort of expect as well, I'd say.
The Western Shah in this definitely get the full villain treatment for sure. It's kind of like in these movies when you have like the Japanese occupation or something. The Japanese are just, you know, sort of caricatures. And I mean, in this one, they spend most of their time, from what we see, torturing prisoners. You know, in like the king is just sort of sitting there, you know, with his men, you know, coming up with what to do with the prisoners, and they're just sort of constantly upping the ante and drinking the blood of their enemies. You know, it's very it's definitely a little bit over the top, but I think for the purposes of the movie, it definitely works. You just would want to, if you were you wouldn't want to just absorb this information for your history class when you're when you're working on a paper, but for dramatic purposes it works great.
Yeah, it was definitely the movie trick of just getting you to hate the villain seemed their primary purpose in this scene and some of the future scenes. It worked. It worked on me. I was raring for the vengeance to happen in this movie.
And I should say we get Lolier as the 5th prince, who is like the real villain in the movie. Like, he's not the most powerful prince, or not the most powerful character on that side, but he is definitely the villain, I think, of the film. And Lolier is a really good actor to use in that kind of role. And he has a great moment later on in the movie with Ivy Ling Po where they face off that I think really worked. So there's and I thought the music too that they were playing when he's standing in the wind there's a lot of music like that's very traditional and effective, and I thought, like, you know, it sort of feels like it's trying to get your blood, you know, like the blood flowing. It's like that kind of music.
It's very Peking opera as well, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely, it definitely has that. But it's like very emotional. Like there's a very I don't know. I feel like I want to do something when I'm listening to the music. Like I like. It's I found it moving, and so I thought that added a lot to it. But yeah, so then we get to the next scene, which is the birthday celebration of Zhang Bao. So the women of the Yang family are gathered to honor him on his birthday, and even though he's in the front lines, and they don't have any idea yet that he's been killed. And we've already witnessed the the brutal massacre, so we know the truth. And this is an interesting scene because number one, we meet Mu Guiying, who is the wife of General Yang and kind of one of the main heroines of the movie, and we also meet the grandmother of the film, Shi Tai Chun, played by Lisa Liu, and so and my apologies, we're having a storm and I'm getting some sound, so if people can hear that, I apologize. But they use this interesting technique where they have Mu Guiying toast each of the women in the family that are present, and they use that opportunity to put a title card for each character. So it's kind of a neat little trick, that I thought was visually effective and also gave you a sense of, wow, there's a huge number of characters in this movie. It's sort of like the opening of Brave Archer, where it's just like character after character. But it was a little bit more natural and actually part of what was going on, so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but on the other hand, too, it was people dressed mainly the same, and you're just like, it was really,
Who's
really hard to
important?
track.
Who should I remember? And I actually thought the aunt who was drinking 2 portions of wine was gonna be like relevant.
Yeah,
She stood out a bit too much to not be relevant. But then like I don't remember her doing anything significant through the movie.
that seemed like a very backhanded kind of insult to. Oh, you're very good at drinking. It was just.
Yeah, there are a lot of characters. I think you obviously need to remember Mu Guiying. You need to remember Shi Tai Chun, and it's a good idea to remember Yang Wengguang, the Lily Ho character, who's a boy but played by a woman. And and I think the only other character that you like would need to remember would be the Yang Peifeng character, the one played by Xu Peipei, because she has some big moments in the movie. But and again, there are men too that are important, but they're not as many to sort of keep track of. So, but I would say those 4 or 5 characters who you want to focus on, and then if you can pick it up, on rewatches, then all the better. But I think the important thing that they're trying to do is overwhelm you with the number of Yang women that are present. So that's the it doesn't matter if you can keep track of everybody. But during the festivities, General Meng and General Chao, the 2 generals he sent off, arrive, and they give the bad news to Mu Guiying, but then they sort of convince her to not disrupt the party by telling everybody, because they don't want the Shi Tai Chun character to be aware of it yet. But she sort of works it out when they go to report to her. She figures out, well, he wouldn't send you here for a stupid reason. So and then we get like everybody, there are these waves of grief at the party. The first, we have Mu Guiying, who sort of hit the first and probably the hardest, and we get like this. You can sort of feel the effect of the loss from her. And then when Shi Tai Chun and all the other characters find out, everybody starts to mourn, and so I'll move on to the shrine in a minute. But did anybody have any comments or thoughts about this opening sequence?
I actually thought it was quite hard on as a character for Mu Guiying, because she steeled herself up to try and like hide this news from everybody. Like she was like determined, and she put the flower back in her hair, and she's like, I'm going to keep this news a secret until the party's over. And then she had to like all that sort of just dissolve, was because the Grand Duchess was more shrewd than she appeared, I guess, and was able to discern the truth from the behaviors of the soldiers and her knowledge of her. I guess, is it a son or grandson?
I think it's her grandson, actually.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, because the grandmother was actually so her daughter was actually sat next to Mu Guiying, and Mu Guiying was calling her grandmother. No, wait, no. Oh. I think she's the great grandmother of the family.
So she's the matriarch, and she's and so but what was it that I was saying? So So yeah. So any additional thoughts on that moment in the film?
I don't know. I thought the grief was very palpable and very well
Mhm.
done from all of the characters there. You could really feel like their loss there, and I guess we'll talk about the shrine bit in a bit. So that's quite important.
Yeah, because the next scene is the shrine where they go to pay their respects, and uh, Prime Minister Ku arrives, and he seems to be a reasonable man who has the respect of the Yang family. But then this War Minister Wong shows up, and he and Shi Tai Chun don't see eye to eye on things. And initially, he sort of is respectful, but then she presses him to. Like we need to send troops to deal with these, this invasion, and he says, no, we lose too many men. We don't have enough men to send, and she sort of reminds him in the dubs. I think she said there were 500,000 men, but I'm pretty sure in the sub she said there were 800,000 of the Imperial Army in the city. And he says that no, we can't use those. That would be, and so. So they kind of get into a little bit of a verbal sparring match, and he calls them a family of dreaming, unrealistic widows. And she rebukes him by saying, "Look behind you," and she points at a mural, and it's got images of the Yang family fighting all these battles. And she says, since the country was born, the Yangs have given themselves. And she gives a big speech on it, and he leaves, and when he leaves she says, she instructs everybody to cleanse the shrine of the taint of this treacherous man. And she's just really really upset by it. And basically they say they can go and do it themselves to him. They're trained in war. They feel that they each can count as a general, and so they would be willing to go and lead the troops. And again, he wasn't having it. So the prime minister says that the war minister Wong controls the troops, so they're going to have to go around him somehow. And so what they ultimately decide to do is they ultimately decide to just march out on their own. And before they do, Wen Quan, the son of General Yang, wants to join them, but because he's the only male heir, they're reluctant to let him leave. So they decide to hold a sparring match to test his spear skill. So his mother Mu Ying spars with him and lets him win, so that he can go and join them for the fight. And yeah, so I don't know, any thoughts on the shrine scene or the spear skill scene?
I kind of felt like the spear scene didn't quite pay off enough. Like it felt like her letting him go, her letting him win so that he could go along, despite the fact he really wasn't ready. I don't feel like that ever came up again. So it felt a little off. But it meant they got to put a little fight scene here early in the movie and pace it a bit. So I guess that works.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Kenny.
No, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think it just had to do with having to establish that it wasn't a matter of them simply being able to let him to go because he's the only son, and they can't just so they had to have something happen. But yeah, I would agree that he kind of you would kind of hope that maybe that would come back to haunt them in some form.
Yeah, I
But
mean, you establish a character isn't ready to do this yet. It should, well, it doesn't have to, but it just felt
But
odd to
but
set
but
that.
also keep in mind this is by Yang family standards, so he's not
That's
ready by
true.
Yang family standards. And I
Okay.
should point out again, this character is played by a woman. It's played by Lily Ho, who's famous for playing Ainu in Intimate Confessions of a Chinese Courtesan. And the characters could not be more different, so it's very striking to see her in these two roles. But I don't know, she kind of, to me in this role, I feel like she almost acts the way Cheng Pei Pei acts in a lot of her movies. There was something very similar to some of the films I've seen Cheng Pei Pei in, with the way that she was acting here. But yeah, I don't know, Kenny, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I thought that you could really feel the pride sort of seeping from She Taichun, so from the Grand Duchess's sort of acting there, like the way she was like addressing the mural and pointing
Mm.
at the family plaque, which sort of denoted their loyalty and then the fact that they showed all of the ancestral tablets. For all the Yang generals who have sacrificed their life for the country was particularly striking as well, and I just really liked how it felt like this is a family full of strong people, regardless of whether they were male or female. That they were trained for war. They were brought up on the battlefield, baptized in blood for whatever, that sort of thing. It really came through in that scene, I thought.
Yeah, Shay Chun, after these two previous scenes, both her figuring out about the lie and just her being firm in this scene, it's like you just have no question about her at this point at all. She is in charge.
Yeah, she's a very strong character, Shi Tai Chun. She is a determined person.
Mhm.
And we get the next scene where they mount for war, and that's when Yang Pei Feng asks to join at the last minute, and that now there's a decision with some consequences. There's that sort of has an effect down the road, and we also get Yang Hong. I think that was his name, played by Ku Wen, the old guy who asked to join. He's old. They're a little bit worried, but they let him join. And so as they're heading out, they're confronted by War Minister Wong, and he objects. And then she threatens to have him beaten, and she's got her dragon-headed staff. So she there's this exchange where the Minister of War asks the Prime Minister, "What's the penalty if somebody hits me?" And he says, "Oh, execution of the whole family." And then he looks satisfied, and then Shi Tai Chun gets this smug look, and she says, "Yes, but what about for me?" And she says, and the Prime Minister says, for her nothing. There is no penalty. She's got the dragon-headed staff, which belonged to this old emperor, and basically it puts her above the law, so she can use it to rebuke misbehaving ministers and emperors. And so she does beat him. She actually beats him with the staff, and then the Prime Minister's like, he's had enough. Like, let's let's move on. And so she's just says, well, I'll be back for a day of reckoning, and that's it. So I mean, it was a very interesting scene. This is not a very long scene, but I thought you guys might have thoughts on that moment.
I really liked it as well. Yeah, it's just because she's just showing herself to be more and more badass as the scenes go on. You'd think she's like a kind old granny type guy. When she's first introduced and she's like sort of addressing her family, like you think of her as a kindly old friendly grandmother type, and then now she's just like beating a minister using a staff bestowed by the late emperor. It sort of speaks a lot about the sort of family history here as well. The fact that they're so appreciated and trusted by previous emperors, and then the state of the country now is sort of decaying, and things are falling apart now that they're sort of no longer relying on their family, and sort of amps up their heroism a little bit there, or probably it's like I don't know, not falsely propping it up, but it's sort of like making them seem like a much bigger deal than they probably are. But it's sort of understandable for them for the sake of the movie why they would sort of depict them in such a heroic way.
Well, I think they're also meant to sort of be like an ideal, like something to sort of give people to sort of, like you look at the Yang family and you sort of realize, oh boy, I fall quite short of that. I don't think I could stand toe to Shi Tai Chun. But yeah. Oh, Adam, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Uh, it's just a very satisfying scene. There's, like I said, I agree with Kenny on that one. It's just, they've kind of, it's kind of, that the previous scenes have set her up as being this powerful person, and now you just get to see her, using that power and taking down this war minister.
And so the next scene is just a scene at camp where they're sort of like planning their approach, And I guess the important thing that happens here is they decide to use guile, and that they're gonna sort of avoid go like around the mountains and attack through the rear is I think what they said, and so, and it's a minor moment in the film, and then we see the Shah encampment, their fortress, and this is where we sort of get the full display of the brutality that Kenny was talking about earlier. We get to see Bolo Young is sort of a tough soldier guy, just brutalizing people, and I think the king or the emperor says, I want them to develop a taste for some blood when we take over Song country. So he's encouraging them to do this, and he gives them Song women, and Bolo Young's character gets slapped by the woman, so he just kills her right there on the spot, and then tries to rip open her clothing, and then that's when the slave Lu Chao or Lu Shen, depending on the sub or the dub, shows up, played by Yu Hua, and he tries to cover up her torn pant leg, and he ends up embroiled in a situation with Bolo Young, who's a really imposing, intimidating guy. And they basically say that he's going to have to fight a duel with Bolo Young. They're trying to kill him pretty much, but they're also sort of trying to be men of their word, and they say, you fight a duel, and if you win, you're free, and if you, if you die, you die. So, and before the duel, for whatever reason, he has to get whipped because he's a slave. I don't understand that moment actually, but he has to get whipped in the chest, and then they and this is something that happens a lot in the movie. They put drops of his blood into a bowl and mix it with water, and then Bolo Young drinks it, and then they fight. And so, the fight is generally not going Lu Chao's way initially. Bolo Young is kind of grandstanding. He's sticking his butt out, and he's just basically taunting the guy when he's on the ground. And he tries to throw him off the edge of a ledge onto some concrete, and then jump down on him. And in the process, Bolo Young's character falls and hurts his head, and the tide of battle turns in favor of Lu Chao because of Bolo Young's character's stupidity. And so he eventually wins the fight, and he talks to his sister after, and they overhear that there are these few hundred Song troops on their way. And so she and that the Shah are planning an ambush. So the sister convinces him to run out and defect to the Song and inform them of the ambush. And it's sort of a brave thing on her part, because she knows that she's probably going to get killed the moment they find out he's done this. So I don't know, thoughts on this scene.
I think the sort of the scene where they're whipping him is because slaves are technically not supposed to be able to. It's similar to how before you can report a crime against your master, you had to get tortured and sign a confession, right? Remember from I can't remember what movie we watched where that was a thing. Do you remember that?
I don't remember which movie, but I know. But it's a thing. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah. So it's sort of that thing in the courtroom where you had to get thrown on spikes or whatever, and then...
Oh, it might have been. Was it the Five Venoms? Was that the movie that you were thinking of?
It's got the Venoms in it. I can't remember which movie it was.
Yeah, it's definitely a Venom movie.
But it's probably that sort of we'll gloss over which movie it was, but it was that sort of thing where you had to first take punishment for raising a hand to his masters or whatever, and then you could have to fight. I'm not sure why for the blood though. That just seems extra.
But it's recurring. They do the blood a lot in this. Lolier does it too when he's whipping somebody.
Well, he licks it off the whip directly, and I feel that's more like perversion from Lolier's part, his act of perversion rather than intimidation or whatever. It's just
probably.
I spent.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have to admit, I spent part of this movie wondering. I wonder what they use for fake blood and what it tastes like. That was something that ran through. But,
I was especially when he drank the water. I was wondering if there was still fake Shaw Brothers blood in that water, or if it was.
Yeah, I mean, the later whip scene is where you can see it on his tongue in the whip scene. So I was like, okay, he's really drinking this stuff.
I think you can make pretty convincing fake blood with corn syrup. So maybe he was just drinking some corn syrup with food coloring in it.
Yeah, it was
But
probably something like that. But I don't
I,
know.
I,
Oh,
As
go
I
on.
say, like I like to think that Bolo Young had no idea what was going on. So you see him dip his finger in and stir it and lick it before he starts to grab the bowl and drink it. So it's like I wonder if it's like exactly. I'm not really sure what this is. So I'm just gonna. Oh, that's fine. I'll take it now.
I gotta say, I loved the way they did Bolo Young's eyebrows in this one. They really sort of completed the character that he was supposed to be. Um, so then Lu Chao goes to the Yang camp, and there's a little bit of concern that he might be a spy or something, but he eventually convinces them that there's an ambush, and they have to talk about what to do over this ambush, and they decide a detour would take too long, so they're just gonna take their chances and walk right into the ambush basically. And so the ambush is set at this pass through the mountains, and they have these fake trees so they can do this fire trap, and the tactic that they end up deciding upon is as they're approaching, I think it's Yang Pei Fung, sort of starts rolling on the ground in pain, acting like something's happened to her, and then as everybody's distracted, the people on the Yang side slip up into the cliffs to attack the ambushers as sort of like a preemptive ambush, I guess. I don't know, and then a big violent skirmish just breaks out, and there's people on fire and supplies on fire and people getting thrown into boulders and boulders getting thrown onto people, and this is where I think you see some of the real sort of crippling bloodshed that we talked about at the very beginning of this. But the big thing that really is that the important thing that happens during this scene is the loss of provisions. The provision loss, it becomes an important plot point in upcoming scenes. But did you guys have any thoughts on the ambush scene or any of the stuff that happened at this point?
I gotta say, like for all their sort of declaration of using guile and like outwitting the enemy, let's walk into the trap. Hardly seems like the best of plans. Like I was thinking, you're from a family of famous generals, and the best thing you can think of is going into a situation where the enemy has both the high ground and preparation to roll shit on you and like fire shit on you, and you also know that there is a fire trap ready to like be sprung around your army, and you still think it's a good idea to just walk straight in.
Yeah, I think my feeling of where it like really fell apart for me, they walk up to the edge of the trap. They have the one woman like throw the fit as a diversion, and the rest like sneak around. But then before the ones that snuck around can really do their ambush from behind, they charge forward. It's like if you're gonna take out all the traps above, what's the hurry? Take out the traps above, then you can move forward. But I don't know. It seemed weird to me.
Yeah, and I do think that I think that they were trying to, like, kind of like Kenny was saying, they were trying to do two things at the same time. They were trying to highlight bravery and guile in the same moment, and it kind of felt weird because they're like, oh, we're gonna be clever, but no, we're gonna charge in and just so I would kind of agree with that. I thought the scene was effective in the sort of flesh ripping brutality of it, and like and I think that's something that in this movie is quite remarkable, the way they do it. It's not it's weird. It's like not really gory, yet it is sort of unnerving when you see, like, I think it's more to do with the sound effects and the volume of blood. But you feel like this is real violence, and you also get a sense of the ferocity of the Yang family when they're fighting. There's that one scene where I can't remember which character it is, but she's up on that big pile of rocks and she's fighting with the Shah, and she's just ferocious. It was like like just going down fighting, like literally going down fighting until the boulders collapse.
Yeah, I could argue about the strategy involved, but it was a good action scene. There's no question.
Yeah, I thought it was definitely this was our first casual. Well, I think it's the first casualty, right?
I think aside from a couple of people that didn't matter initially.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but this particular death was, I thought, quite brutal because what happened was both her and the the Western Shah general guy were fall off the edge and have like the rock trap and the log traps like crushing them underneath it.
Mm.
So I don't know, it just felt like like you said, it wasn't gory or anything. You didn't see that like blood splatter like you would in like a Saw movie or whatever. But you see them rolling down a cliff and being crushed by logs and boulders, and it's just like something really, I'd say, real about that you wouldn't normally get in this sort of movie. So you think, oh god, they died to a mundane rock trap, and it adds a very element of a very real element of danger to the movie, and that people are very mortal. They will die to injuries and and ultimately they are people in a war, and that things can happen like that.
Yeah, it's a very unusual movie because there's a combination of sort of like some really sort of unusual I don't know what you would call it, like not quite gonzo, but definitely some crazy things happen. Like somebody climbs up the side of a cliff with two short spears, and there's the human bridge scene, which we'll get to, but it's also very grounded, like you're saying. Like they're like people, like people get chucked into the fire and die, and the reliance on the provisions becomes a really massive plot point where they have to and we'll talk about that soon. But they don't just gloss over the loss of the food stuff. In a lot of movies they'll do that, and so it feels kind of grounded in reality, even when it sometimes gets larger than life in moments. It always comes back down to earth, it seems.
Yeah, that was where it started to feel like a real war movie to an extent. Once the provisions came into play, I'm like, okay, this is a war movie.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, you get a real sense of that. And so following the ambush, we also get sort of a protracted battle in the woodlands, where the Shah sort of try to sort of weed them out, and there's these sort of various engagements through the woods, and that ultimately leads to a big showdown. It ultimately leads to a big showdown with Gui Ying, Wen Kwang, and Fifth Prince. And this is where you have the duel where they're up on a cliff, and Mu Guiying and Fifth Prince are sort of standing off, and he's firing his arrows at her, and she's got her spear, and eventually it looks like she's got the upper hand, but he pulls a fast one, and he has this trick he uses with his bow where he gets it to snap back and hit her in the chest, and then he takes the opportunity to flee. So I don't know, any thoughts on the woodland battle or the duel between Guiying and Fifth Prince?
Like I like the idea of using the bow as a staff. I mean, ultimately, a bow is a staff that is forced to bend by tempering and stretching of the bowstring, and the fact that that when he snaps the bowstring and it's sort of all that pent up force is released into like a strike to her chest, and that blow is relevant for the rest of the movie because I don't know why it gives her headaches or. Is it headaches? It is headaches, right?
Yeah, she gets headaches
chest
and blurred
pains.
vision from that blow to the chest for some reason.
Yeah.
It must have hit some kind of vital
Well, they
acupuncture.
mentioned a poison being used too, so there's that.
The
She
poison was in the arrows, right? And she wasn't
yeah
wounded by any
yeah
of the
she
arrows.
she wasn't hit.
Yeah, I was confused about it. I was wondering, okay? So she really wasn't hit. Okay,
But
I was that's
I think it's one of these things. It's kind of like the things in wuxia movies where once somebody coughs up blood and they have some kind of internal injury, it can be so many different things,
uh-huh.
and so I think that's what it was going on here.
Yeah. Or even that, if we're trying to like do a realistic take on it, it might be what's that condition called where whiplash of some sort from the force of the blow,
Well,
and then maybe she pinched a nerve in her spinal cord.
Well, also now that you are going down the realistic angle, she did get tossed several feet into the air and land on the ground hard, so she probably had a concussion,
Oh
and
yeah.
and also the blow to the chest. I guess that blurry vision could be representing like a loss of breath. Like maybe her heart was affected or her
Yeah.
lungs were affected, and so the blood is backing up into her lungs periodically, and she's just kind of getting a little bit dizzy and blurred. So maybe it was more realistic now that we're actually sort of dissecting it. I don't know. But
But no, I thought it was a really good scene for Lole there. It's just it showed him as being like, he was so like suave and nonchalant about it, sitting on the rock and like, oh, come on, come kill me. And he still had this trick up his sleeve, which I thought was pretty cool, and it sort of highlighted how cunning he was. Like, he was not just like pure. He's not pure brutality. He has smarts in him as well.
And also how he was taunting her with like I shot arrows like this through your husband's chest, like he just was and
it's like I got three for you and three for your son.
and the son is just getting all riled up, and she has to calm him down, and so I thought it was a really cool scene. It's one of the more memorable moments in the movie for me. And then it's followed by Lu Chao's sister pays the price exactly like she said she would, and so we get a scene where they're gonna try to torture her, but one of the other women sort of gives her a mercy killing so that she doesn't have to deal with any of that, and I think we get a little bit more of a window into the brutality of the Shah here, and then we move into the supply issue where they're camped in the woods and they're boiling these really bitter looking leaves, and drinking the water, and they're trying to debate what to do about the food situation. They don't want to go on a raid because they're thinking of raiding the Shah supplies, but they realize the Shah would be expecting them to do that, so it's not a good idea. And Guiying doesn't want to eat the horses because the horses have served them so well. And there's even kind of a slightly comedic scene that actually comes back. Like, it actually has effect later in the movie where General Chow and General Meng catch a dog, and they decide that they're going to try to eat it. And Hong, the guy that decided at the last minute to join them, is like, no, I'm not going to let you eat that dog. If you try to eat that dog, I'll eat you. Like, what has this dog done to you? And he lets the dog go, and then they he talks with Yang Pei Fung about going on a raid, even though they've been ordered not to, and so they ultimately do. They ultimately go to like one of the forts where they have supplies, and they take out these bamboo tubes and create like a chain with them, and then they siphon the grain out of the sacks. It's a really ingenious method for getting the grain downhill. But that dog that they let go comes back, and because he saved it, it doesn't end up barking. But the guards do discover what they're doing anyways. However, instead of coming out and attacking them right away, they decide to let them leave, and then they're going to follow them back to camp. And on their way back, some of the soldiers intercept Yang Pei Fung, and she's wounded, and Wen Kuang has to sort of help her get back, and so they then they sort of shift back to the camp, and neither Wen Kuang nor Yang Pei Fung are there, and so they decide that they're going to have to press on. And at the last minute, Wen Kuang and Yang Pei Fung return, and then there's this sort of dramatic moment where Shi Tai Chun is threatening to execute Yang Pei Fung because she disobeyed orders, but she's ultimately persuaded to be merciful and make an exception in this case. But then Yang Pei Fung dies of her injuries anyways, though she's happy to learn that she was given this gesture of mercy. So I don't know, what do you guys think of those scenes? The death of Lu Chao's sister, the food supply, and the food raid.
I definitely enjoyed the part where they used the bamboos to siphon the rice. It was like, at first I was really confused as to why they were sort of carrying this bamboo with them. It's like I thought they were going to try and pole vault into the granary or something. But when they stabbed it through, it's like, oh, of course they can use that to sort of siphon it down, and it's really clever. I don't know. It seems like, I don't know if that would be like a valid strategy in war, but or if it's just something fanciful from the directors there or the script writers. But it's definitely one of those things which is like, when you see it, it's like, yeah, that's pretty impressive. The ancient people were quite smart, apparently.
I don't know if that, like, I suppose, I don't know. I have no idea how supply raids were conducted, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut on that. But what I will say is, I think in a role-playing game it would totally fly. If my players came up with that in a role-playing game, I would be, that would be magical. So it's I think it's cunning enough for movie and games for sure. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was reading a history book and came across something that was like that. Do you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
I gotta say though, like, the dog part doesn't really make sense to me. Like, I know that he rescued it and it doesn't bark and all that, but in that case, could the dog have not shown up at all? And what difference would that have made? Like, it could have saved like the 2 minutes of dialogue with the dog in the beginning and
Well,
the 30 seconds.
and if
of,
they'd eaten the dog, it wouldn't have been an issue either, too. I guess unless the assumption is another attack dog would have been there. So
Yeah.
Well, it's because the thing is, like, it was just a stray, right? So it's like it wasn't like it was guarding the.
I thought it was their guard dog. I thought it was like one of the dogs of the fort.
I don't know. He calls it a stray earlier, so it's like
Okay.
during the first scene, he call. I mean, maybe Hong was wrong about it, but he refers to it as one, I think. But
Like if it was something like the dog shows up at some point and bites like one of the Shah soldiers or whatever, then yeah, okay, that sort of tells a story of animals being intelligent and recognizing people who help them, that type of thing. But here it was just like, well, if you didn't have the dog in the first place, or if they actually ate the dog, and then it wouldn't have been an issue either way.
Well, and
so
also,
the thing is that.
oh, go ahead.
The thing is with dogs too, knowing dogs well, if you make a dog like you, saying that means it won't bark when it sees me is a bad assumption. It's like, hey, it's my friend Hong, roof, roof, starts barking.
I also do think the Hong character suffered a bit from the dubs. The sub version had a little bit more dignity to him, and the dub version, he had a weird speech impediment. I don't quite know what it was, but his
We're talking about
S's
Hong, you said?
yeah, Hong, the old guy. His S's were sounding like SH's or something. There was something there, and it just kind of it gave the character an effect that didn't feel present in the.
Yeah,
it was quite foolish sound seeming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta admit the dubs are always tricky. I mean, we know that Lily got an award for this movie, but it's like with the dub voice that she has, it doesn't come off exactly as an award-winning performance, which is no fault of hers.
Well, one thing to keep in mind too is that I think that this movie would have been dubbed over anyways in the original Mandarin. So even if, so what you're really looking for with that performance is her physical performance, I believe. I could be mistaken in this individual case, but usually these older movies, you're not even hearing the actor anyways when you do have the subtitles on. But I think if you pay attention to her physical performance, you can definitely see it. And again, if you watch that performance and then you contrast it with her performance in Intimate Confessions of a Chinese Courtesan, it's a really striking range.
Yeah.
But anyways, the Shah end up following them to camp. And a couple of them get in there and fire off a signal from a bow, and so they have to up and leave. But they sort of cleverly leave behind some of the Shah inside one of the tents. And when the Shah get there, they assume it's them, and so they send some flaming arrows at the tent and burn their own men. Which I don't know. I thought that was kind of a funny little scene. And then as they're fleeing, they go into the hills and they go up this big vine ladder. And this is where you really get a sense of sort of the adventure of war too, where they're sort of climbing up the vine ladder, and then they're about to cross this important bridge, but the Shah burn the bridge, and so they try to get across, and only like half of them do before it burns down, and Wen Kuang gets stuck on the bridge and dangling from like a cord, and has to barely just make it across, and so this is like a really famous moment in the movie where Mu Guiying says, "Okay, we're going to form a human bridge," and they just form pyramids on either side of the chasm, and they in perfect time they sort of fall together and create a human bridge, and then people start walking over it, and they're still getting pressed by the enemy though, so the Shah start coming up from the rear, and they have to send some of their men to die to sort of fend off the their back so that the rest of their people can get over the bridge. And so we'll move into the next stuff after, but we probably should talk about the bridge scene and the burning of the tent. Any thoughts on those moments?
I thought it was quite clever of them to put the soldiers in the tent as well. And that was just quite a satisfying scene to see them sort of killing their own people, especially after we've sort of been treated to their brutality and their torturing of people. It only seems like poetic justice for them to torture their own people in the same, not in the same way, but like in a brutal way as well.
Yeah, just counting on their brutality was what made it work.
Yeah, yeah, I think that scene is like the bad guys kind of get their just desserts for a moment. Is the it's a and also just sort of how the realization when they realize what they're doing. Um, what about the human bridge?
Oh man, that was my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's great.
that was it goes so far out of the realm of absurdity that it just also like, you know what, this is brilliant. Like I can't say anything else about it. It's just-
Well, and I'm convinced. I mean, I've seen enough pep rallies in my day that I think that with enough practice, that sort of thing could be done. Like I can imagine a cheerleading squad achieving something kind of like that. So if they've been practicing the drill, then I think maybe it's viable. I don't know, but it definitely. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. They're sort of they stack up on either side and then they just fall down and form a bridge. But yeah, I think it's visually it's very striking, and it's also just sort of the perseverance. It's like it's the point where most people be like, okay, the bridge is gone, like we're gonna have to go another way, like there's no, and then no, we're if the bridge falls down, we'll be the bridge. It's just the ultimate in not giving up. So which I think again, I think that's a big part of these kind of movies. That's it's sort of what separates the like sometimes the characters die in the process, but they maintain they hold your respect if they can just keep going and keep coming up with solutions. And in the next scene, they're sort of contemplating how to attack the Shah. They're now sort of in position to sort of actually launch an attack, and they have to think of a way to sort of get their soldiers out of the encampment so they can get in there and assassinate the king and his princes. And so Wu Guiying thinks about it, and she asks her husband for guidance, and she then sees branches floating in the water, so it's like he gave her a sign. And she realizes that they can bust the dam. So if they bust the dam and sound the alarms in the fort, so that the men all leave to go intercept the enemy, and then bust the dam after they've left, it'll cut off their return, and they'll be free to sort of wage an attack inside the fort. And so we'll get into the rest of it in a bit. But what did you guys think of that plan? Number one, what did you think of the moment where she sort of got inspiration from the plan?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like I didn't quite understand the plan when it was mentioned the first time around. It's only when I actually saw the plan in action that I sort of understood that they wanted to, how that scene inspired her. Because I thought the branches were just like, oh, maybe they'll try to attack from underwater or
Yeah.
something. But after she explained that, I sort of realized, oh, that's because the branch was like sort of hitting against like um so the edge of the lake or whatever that sort of inspired her to try and attack what was stopping the water from flowing, which was a dam. And it's a classic war strategy. You lure the enemy to where you don't want them to be, and then you take them out and stop them from getting to where they want to be. It's fairly straightforward misdirection, I'd say.
Well, yeah, I thought it's a good tactic, and it's obviously we'll find out it's going to involve tremendous sacrifice. So yeah, I thought it was I think it's like a cool scene where um, uh, it doesn't seem like much, but something about that scene really helps kind of establish the overall uh, mood of the movie for me. Like especially the way that the sets are utilized at this point, because a lot of the film up until this point has been outdoors. But when you get to the bridge scene, you get to the scene where she sees the branches in the water. They're using a lot of more sort of like classic Shaw Brothers type sets, and I feel like it helps create like a little bit more of a fantastical world around you. Like you just and so it just does a lot for the atmosphere. Um, so so after that, some of their people are captured and interrogated by the Fifth Prince, and and then they, as that's happening, they stage uh, their plan. And so the first part of the plan is they have to take the alarm tower, like the watchman towers, and then they are going to convince each of the watchmen to sound the alarm that the Song troops are approaching, and then hopefully the Shah forces will leave the gates, and then they can attack. And so they manage, but the Shah weren't born yesterday. So Fifth Prince kind of goes and checks, and the first watchman he talks to has like a wine gourd and seems a little bit drunk, and so he says, "This guy's a drunk. Like, let's." So they ask each of the watchmen, but they have foresight. So they've taken over every single one of the towers, and all of the watchmen confirm that they've seen the signal, and so they end up sending their men out. But then there's a delay in the bridge breaking, and General Chow and General Meng, along with three brothers, have volunteered to go and destroy the dam, and they know it's a suicide mission because the dam is going to burst on them, and so they launch an initial assault, and then there's kind of a moment where things back down a little bit, and it's unclear whether the troops are going to be able to return or not, and so then the dam is finally burst open, and it floods the whole area with water, and a lot of the Shah troops get washed away. And then we have the massive battle, and it's just as brutal as all the other battles. It's a really sort of great spear versus sword and shield fight. Like, you have these golden shields and the swords versus the spears, and eventually the Yang women are victorious, but at cost. Like, people are it's not an easy fight. And the last one to go down is actually the Fifth Prince. The king dies fairly early under the hand of Mu Wu Ying, and I do want to talk about that scene a little bit in a moment. And then they slowly pick off the remaining five princes, and then they return home, and Minister Wong has to, it's a very embarrassing moment for Minister Wong, and he's forced to receive them, and he tells them an imperial banquet awaits them, and they say they're not going to go, that they should eat, hold the banquet in honor of those who didn't return, and Shi Tai Chun is still and has a message that she wants to give to the emperor about a minister who does not know what he's doing and is has been bad for the country. So it was a very quick synopsis of the last section of the movie. But what do you guys think of all those scenes?
Oh man, I've the sort of tension moment where the Fifth Prince was investigating and everyone was checking with all the watchtowers was quite well done. Like, it was like, yeah, by this point I'm so invested in the movie and the vengeance of the Yang family that I was just like, I want it to go well for them. Yeah. But at the same time, it's just like we don't know, that we didn't know by then that they had all secured all the towers and all the scouts. So we just sort of sat there thinking, are they going to find out? Did they leave anything? And I really enjoyed the little ploy there, and I also appreciate the fact that the Fifth Prince was so shrewd and cautious that he would actually go climb up himself to check to make sure everything was okay. It really just sort of adds to his character. Despite the fact that his character doesn't really do much per se throughout the movie, but it's little scenes like this really sort of bring out I don't know if it's Lo Lieh or the way the character is written.
Lo Lieh is I think he's just a good villain, no matter what he's doing. I mean, but it requires good writing too, because I mean, I've seen him in movies where it's not, anything special. This was a role that he was able to really sort of settle in well, I think.
There's lots of movies where I'll be cynical enough that I just assume everything is going to go well, and they're just kind of jerking me around with suspense. But with this, I was like, is this going to work? Is this going to work? I got invested in that as well.
And
and the massive clash actually with the shields and the spears was that was a treat for the eyes. But at the same time, it was also I was thinking, yeah, that's pretty realistic. I mean, for whatever reason, none of the song people have thought of using shields for in their
Well, they
combat.
have
And you
double-headed
get this,
spears, right? That's their big thing, the double-headed spears. Yeah, you would think they
yeah.
would have shields to go along with.
But it's
Yeah.
just like there's sort of like a shield phalanx from the Sharp soldiers. It's just like, yeah, they formed a shield wall and they couldn't get past because when they were trying to attack, they just like hold these shields and just deflect them, and you have people behind them sort of stabbing outwards to kill them. And it was a very, yeah, they lost a lot of people in the sort of initial clash, in the first two clashes there, and it was only because they forcefully sort of pushed through and disrupted the formation that they managed to, win the fight in the end.
Well, what did they do? They interlocked, right? They like interlocked and made a formation of their
Yeah,
own almost. And
yeah.
and there's a great scene too where Mu Ying is sort of like holding her spear out, and like the camera kind of comes at like sort of shakes in like that, and like this really weird zoom. And it's just I think it's a really astounding, like it just is one of the most visually impressive parts of the film. But it's only a brief moment; you barely notice it. I didn't notice it until I saw a GIF of it, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, that was a really cool moment." And now every time I see the movie, like that scene stands out. But the she's the one who kills the king, and in the dubs, their exchange is fairly, I don't know, there's not anything substantial about it. It's just kind of like I don't even think it was that memorable. But in the subs, if I recall, and I could be wrong because I'm going by memory, but I think the king said, "Why did you come?" And she said, "Because I am Mu Ying." And that I thought was like that really had an impact. That was like, well, of course, that's it was a really great moment, and I might be butchering it or misremembering it, but it had that kind of an effect, and so it was kind of a shame in the dubs that the weight of that didn't come over, but yeah, so it's a great last battle, and then they sort of when they return sort of victorious, but they've lost a lot of people. It was I thought it was a nice cap to the movie. Um,
There's one thing I wanted to mention. So at the moment of the breaking of the dam, I really appreciated the camera work at that point as well, and all the sort of the directing and the editing there, just because of the way it's sort of coinciding with her dizzy spells,
yeah,
the way it's sort of switching between like the desperation of the two generals and their men trying to hack away at this thick wooden dam, and the
Yeah.
soldiers riding ever closer, and it was all just sort of that was felt like the climax of the movie to me. It's like it's like the tipping point, the moment of whether they succeed or fail. It's just like whether she falls now from her wounds from that fight with the Fifth Prince, and whether the general succeed with their dam. It was sort of, everything felt like it was riding in that moment, and I feel like that was like a sort of a high for me there.
yeah,
Yeah, I had the same thing. It's like, 'cause, as someone that gets pretty bad headaches at times, just going from conveying that she has a headache to going to people pounding on the dam with axes, I'm like, yeah, that it complemented very well.
well, and it also felt like a heartbeat or a pulse too, like that thumping.
Yeah,
It just it was
yeah.
like it seemed to be it seemed whatever she was experiencing, it seemed to be related to that. And so, and also to your own heartbeat, it was a very, I don't know,
Yeah.
you felt like you were connected to that scene by all those different sounds and visuals, and so yeah, I would totally agree with that. And even just like the scene where it's flooding, it was, that could have looked really bad. That could have been
Hmm.
really, I've seen a lot of really bad scenes like that, and then
I
it looked good for the time. I thought it looked very good
It
for the
did.
time.
And it was leading up to that scene. I was like, are they gonna pull off a flood? A
Yeah,
flood is not an easy thing. Are they gonna pull this off? Are they gonna? And they totally
yeah.
pulled it off.
Yeah, because a lot of times it'll look like they did it in a bathtub, and you just get that like, oh, that's like just a faucet. That's not a flood, and
Yeah.
it looked powerful. It worked. It was totally believable.
It
And
made
there
me
was some.
think of the flood scene from Lord of the Rings. Actually, there's one particular scene where the Nazgul or whatever are being
Mm.
flushed away by the river outside the Elven forest.
And what about that scene?
Oh, it basically the flood scene in here reminded me of that. I don't know if there was any inspiration drawn from it, but it's pretty common in movies, I guess, to have a dam being broken and flushing away soldiers or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't put. I mean, it was made by Steve Jackson. No, what was the guy's name who did Lord of the Rings?
Peter.
Peter
Peter
Jackson.
Jackson. I'm thinking of the game designer.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson
There's
did it,
two
and
Steve Jackson game
I mean,
designers. Yeah.
he's Australian, right? So he might
No,
be.
he's from New Zealand.
Oh,
It's
okay.
an
I
important
apologize,
distinction.
Adam, for
Oh, yeah,
that great
yeah.
insult. Uh,
Don't do that.
but but I mean, he's a little bit more in the cultural sphere. Like right, like maybe he would have been more familiar with this movie than like an American director. I don't know. No idea, but I mean, they get more Chinese cinema in New Zealand and in Australia, I would assume, right?
It's possible. I don't know. I haven't really. I've only ever been to the airport in New Zealand,
Okay.
so I
I
can't
always
say for sure.
assumed that there was more,
Well, Peter Jackson is pretty big into cinematic history, so I think it's a safe bet that he's seen some Shaw Brothers movies.
Okay.
I would think.
Um, but yeah, so I don't know, and that's the end of the movie. So, any final thoughts on the film?
I I would definitely recommend this. I mean, it's a good war movie. It's got a nice flow to it. It kind of takes you on this big journey. Comes to a nice emotional, satisfying ending. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, and I agree. And I also sort of enjoyed the sort of the wuxia trope here of, like, the men are supposed to be stalwart and not show their sort of emotion. They're supposed to be stoical all the time, and the women are supposed to be the ones who are emotional and but in this movie they sort of inverted that a little bit, and the women here are all they're passionate, but at the same time, like, they've got the chivalry, the honor and the stoic, like, the whole, despite the fact that the woman just lost her husband thing, she takes command and leads the family into war, essentially, with the country. And that's sort of like a level of heroism that isn't traditionally assigned to women. And I really sort of like how they're portraying that the women here are capable in their own right, and that they are capable of exacting their own vengeance, really.
Yeah, no, they're definitely capable, and I mean, Mugu Ying, she's got like a backstory. There's a whole, she's got credibility before the stuff even unfolds, and I do like how like you said, they invert it, and they're kind of doing it in a way to shame the men in the movie who won't step up. Like there's like the the men of the Song Court are reluctant to send the troops out, and so they have to they sort of have to step up and do it. And it's I don't know, you just, it could have been done in a ridiculous way. It could have come across as silly if they had done it in a certain style, and it came off working. And I think a lot of it goes back to the way that even when it gets ridiculous, it always eventually comes back down to earth in a very sort of rooted way, and so all the action's believable, the characters are believable, the emotions are believable, and the risks are believable. So
Yeah, well, there's a cost to this movie. I mean, and the note it ends on too. So it's like, really, if the war minister had supported them and given them troops, they could have pulled off the same victory with a lot less losses, because they would have had real numbers. And so because everything has a cost. It's not just, hey, they go off and have a breezy victory. So it works.
But yeah, it's a very sort of 300 like situation. It's a very sort
Hmm.
of so yeah. So I don't know. I would recommend it. It's available on Prime. I mean, this is one I would honestly say it's worth getting the DVD, if only so you have the option of watching the subtitles as well as the dubs, but the subtitles,
Yeah.
because the subtitles, I think, in this case add a lot to the movie, especially just kind of getting a sense of, sometimes dubs will add a sense of silliness to it, and if it's a silly movie, that's okay. Like, I was just watching Jade Dagger Ninja, and that has some witty dialogue, and the silliness in the dubs kind of added to it. But I think if you're a movie like this, it's a little bit more stately, a little bit more serious, and so it helps
Yeah.
to kind of know what cue you're supposed to be getting from the dialogue. and the dubs can really blur that a lot. Um, so yeah, so again, we will be back on next week. I believe we're doing the Shadow Whip with Cheng Pei Pei, but I could be wrong. I gotta check our schedule, but I'm like 90% sure that's the movie we're doing. And yeah, and unfortunately we couldn't have Lady Chow Fung tonight, and that's because we have a big storm, and it
Yeah.
disrupted her commute, something awful. So in
Yeah,
fact,
we're in very different parts of the East Coast,
my
and we've all got the same storm going.
my lights have been flickering the whole time I've been doing this, and the wind has been just pummeling my house. So
Yeah.
I'm amazed we even made it through the podcast. To be honest, I thought we were going to get disconnected way back when. So we got a full podcast out of this. So, anyways, we will let you go. You should stay tuned for Sunday, because me and Adam will be back with the rest of our Babylon 5, and on Tuesday we'll have our Sons of Lady 87 session log posted up, and we're gonna have plenty more. And so we will talk to you later.